Octavius Sterling had spent his last $20 to give 8-year-old daughter Lyrical a perfect Christmas memory. Watching her eyes light up at the towering Christmas tree and twinkling decorations, the single father felt every sacrifice had been worthwhile. But when they heard the desperate cries of a lost child in the crowd, their simple act of compassion would open doors to a world he never imagined entering. The ancient Honda Civic wheezed to a stop in the crowded parking lot of Winterland Festival Park, its engine releasing one final shudder before falling silent. Octavius Sterling turned off the radio mid-song and glanced at the fuel gauge hovering dangerously close to empty. 35 years old with calloused hands that told stories of countless hours under car hoods, he calculated mentally whether they had enough gas for the trip home. The math was tight, but it would have to work. Tonight was about Lyrical, not his perpetual budget constraints. "Daddy, look at all the lights!" Lyrical pressed her face against the passenger window, her breath fogging the glass as she traced the twinkling decorations with her finger. At 8 years old, she possessed an infectious enthusiasm that could transform even the most modest outing into an adventure. Her dark curls bounced as she turned to face him, eyes wide with wonder. "It's like a fairy tale, isn't it?" Octavius felt his chest tighten with the familiar mixture of love and guilt that had become his constant companion since Maria's death 2 years ago. He wanted to give Lyrical everything: elaborate vacations, expensive toys, private schools, but this free festival would have to suffice for their Christmas celebration. The December air bit through their thin jackets as they walked toward the entrance, Lyrical's small hand tucked securely in his. The festival grounds buzzed with families bundled in designer coats, their children clutching steaming cups of hot chocolate that cost more than Octavius spent on groceries in a day. He watched other fathers effortlessly purchasing overpriced carnival games and souvenirs, their casual generosity a stark reminder of everything he couldn't provide. But when Lyrical gasped at the towering Christmas tree adorned with thousands of golden lights, her pure joy reminded him that some gifts couldn't be bought. The magic in her eyes was worth more than any amount of money he didn't have. They wandered through the festival grounds hand in hand, sampling free cookies from local bakeries and watching street performers juggle flaming torches. Octavius found himself relaxing for the first time in weeks, watching Lyrical clap along to the carolers' harmonies. This was what Maria would have wanted. Simple moments filled with love rather than expensive gestures, filled with obligation. The weight of single parenthood felt lighter here among the twinkling lights and shared laughter, where his daughter's happiness didn't require a credit card he couldn't afford to use. Near the skating rink, they discovered a section of carnival games where participation was free, funded by local businesses hoping to spread holiday cheer. Lyrical squealed with delight as she knocked down cardboard snowmen with bean bags, winning a small stuffed reindeer that she clutched like treasure. Octavius felt a surge of pride watching her celebrate each small victory with unrestrained enthusiasm. She had inherited Maria's ability to find joy in the simplest pleasures, a gift that had sustained them both through their darkest days. Tonight, surrounded by the warm glow of Christmas lights and his daughter's laughter, Octavius allowed himself to believe that maybe they were going to be okay after all. The evening air grew colder as families began bundling their children toward the exits, but Octavius and Lyrical lingered near a booth offering complimentary hot apple cider. Steam rose from their paper cups as they savored the warmth, watching the last of the street performers pack away their instruments. The festival grounds were beginning to empty, leaving behind scattered programs and the gentle hum of cleanup crews preparing for tomorrow's festivities. Octavius checked his watch. They should head home soon. But Lyrical seemed content to watch the maintenance workers string fresh lights along the pathways. "Can we stay just a little longer, Daddy?" Lyrical's voice carried the drowsy contentment of a perfect evening. She leaned against his side, the stuffed reindeer tucked under one arm while she sipped her cider with the other. Octavius was about to agree when a sound cut through the peaceful atmosphere, high-pitched sobbing that seemed to echo from somewhere near the carousel. The mechanical horses had stopped their circular dance hours ago, leaving the ornate ride silent and shadowy in the gathering darkness. They followed the sound past empty game booths and folded vendor tables, finally discovering its source. A small girl crouched behind a decorative snow globe display, her blonde curls damp with tears. She couldn't have been older than 7, dressed in an expensive velvet coat that suggested wealth but offered little comfort against her obvious terror. Her sobs came in ragged gasps as she clutched a small purse shaped like a snowflake, calling repeatedly for someone named Mama in a voice raw from crying. Lyrical immediately tugged on her father's sleeve, her own eyes filling with sympathetic tears. "Daddy, she's scared and alone. We have to help her." The urgency in his daughter's voice reminded Octavius of Maria, who had never been able to walk past suffering without stopping to offer assistance. But years of navigating the world as a single black father had taught him to be cautious in situations that could be misinterpreted. His natural instinct to help warred with hard-earned wisdom about how his intentions might be perceived by others, especially when it involved a white child from what appeared to be an affluent family. He knelt down to Lyrical's level, keeping his voice low and gentle. "Honey, I want to help too, but we need to be very careful about how we approach this. Some people might not understand that we're trying to be kind." His daughter's brow furrowed in confusion. At 8 years old, she hadn't yet learned to see the world through the lens of racial suspicion that had shaped so much of his adult experience. Her innocence was both precious and painful to witness, a reminder of the childhood simplicity he'd lost somewhere along the way. Despite his reservations, Octavius couldn't ignore the child's distress. He approached slowly, maintaining a respectful distance while Lyrical moved closer to offer comfort. "Sweetheart, are you lost?" he asked gently, his voice carrying the same warm tone he used with his own daughter. The little girl looked up with tear-streaked cheeks and wide blue eyes, nodding frantically as she hiccuped through her sobs. "My mama was buying hot chocolate, and I saw the pretty carousel, and when I turned around, she was gone." Lyrical immediately sat down beside the frightened child, offering her stuffed reindeer as comfort. "What's your name?" "I'm Lyrical, and this is my daddy. He's really good at finding things. He found my favorite bracelet when I lost it at the playground." The simple gesture of childhood friendship seemed to calm the lost girl, who accepted the toy with trembling hands. "I'm Cordelia," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the distant sounds of festival cleanup. "Cordelia Whitmore." Octavius felt his stomach tighten at the surname. Whitmore was synonymous with wealth and influence in their city, printed on hospital wings and university buildings throughout the metropolitan area. This wasn't just any lost child. This was the daughter of one of the most powerful families in the state. The implications crashed over him like cold water, making his earlier caution seem woefully inadequate. But as he watched Lyrical gently wipe tears from Cordelia's cheeks with a napkin from her pocket, he realized that retreat was no longer an option. His daughter's compassion had committed them both to seeing this through, regardless of the potential consequences for their own family's safety. The festival's security station sat at the far end of the grounds, its warm yellow light spilling across the nearly empty pathways. Octavius walked carefully between the two girls, maintaining what he hoped was an appropriate distance while ensuring Cordelia's safety. Lyrical had naturally assumed the role of protector, holding the younger child's hand and chattering softly about the various decorations they passed. Her easy friendship seemed to be working. Cordelia's tears had subsided into occasional sniffles, though her grip on the stuffed reindeer remained fierce. "My mama has really long hair like a princess," Cordelia offered as they navigated around a crew dismantling the outdoor stage. "And she smells like flowers, and she has a special phone that's always ringing with important calls." Her voice carried the unconscious pride of a child describing someone larger than life. Octavius listened carefully, filing away details that might help identify her mother among the remaining festival-goers. The expensive coat, the designer purse, the casual mention of constant business calls, everything painted a picture of privilege that felt worlds away from his own reality. As they walked, Cordelia's descriptions grew more elaborate, revealing glimpses of a lifestyle that seemed almost fictional to someone who counted every dollar. She spoke of multiple houses, staff who helped with daily tasks, and toys that arrived regularly without special occasions to justify them. Yet beneath the material details, Octavius detected something familiar. The same longing for parental attention that he recognized in children at Lyrical's school, whose parents were too busy with careers to attend school events or help with homework projects. "Does your mama like hot chocolate as much as you do?" Lyrical asked, skillfully steering the conversation toward practical details that might aid their search. Cordelia nodded enthusiastically, explaining that they had been heading toward the gourmet cocoa stand when she became distracted by the carousel's painted horses. The booth she described was several hundred yards from where they'd found her, suggesting she had wandered quite far in her exploration. Octavius felt a chill that had nothing to do with the December air. How long had she been missing before anyone noticed her absence? The security station's radio crackled with periodic updates from guards conducting their own search, but none of the descriptions matched what they knew about Cordelia's mother. The officer on duty, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, had immediately begun coordinating with her colleagues while gently questioning Cordelia about her family's plans for the evening. The child answered with the straightforward honesty of someone accustomed to adult attention, providing details about their limousine driver and the private party they were scheduled to attend after the festival visit. "We were only supposed to stay for 30 minutes, Cordelia explained, unconsciously echoing what was likely a frequently repeated schedule constraint. "But I asked to see the carousel because the horses looked so beautiful in the lights, and Mama said we could look for just a few minutes." The timeline she described suggested her mother's panic was probably escalating with each passing moment. Octavius found himself hoping that Genevieve Whitmore possessed enough maternal instinct to prioritize finding her daughter over maintaining her social calendar. Lyrical had settled beside Cordelia on a bench inside the security station, creating an elaborate story about the stuffed reindeer's magical adventures to keep the younger girl distracted. Her natural empathy reminded Octavius of the countless evenings he'd watched Maria comfort neighborhood children who had scraped knees or hurt feelings. The gift of emotional connection seemed to transcend age and circumstance, creating bonds that economics and social status couldn't touch or diminish. The radio suddenly erupted with urgent voices reporting a frantic woman near the main entrance, demanding to speak with security supervisors about her missing daughter. The officer exchanged meaningful glances with Octavius before requesting a detailed description of the woman in question. When the response came through, elegant, blonde, wearing a white cashmere coat and accompanied by what appeared to be private security personnel, Cordelia's face brightened with recognition and relief. But Octavius felt his stomach drop as he realized their good deed was about to intersect with a world of wealth and power where his intentions might be questioned rather than appreciated. The walk to the main entrance felt longer than the distance warranted, each step carrying them toward a confrontation that Octavius had hoped to avoid. He reminded himself that they had done nothing wrong. They had found a lost child and were returning her safely to her family. Yet experience had taught him that innocence offered little protection when situations could be interpreted through the lens of prejudice and fear. The scene at the festival entrance erupted into chaos the moment Genevieve Whitmore spotted her daughter walking beside Octavius. Even from a distance, her scream cut through the winter air like broken glass, a sound of pure maternal terror that sent other families hurrying past with averted eyes. She stood surrounded by 3 men in dark suits who moved with the efficient precision of professional security, their hands instinctively reaching toward concealed weapons as they assessed the situation with cold calculation. "Cordelia! Baby, get away from him right now!" Genevieve's voice cracked with hysteria as she began running toward them, her white cashmere coat billowing behind her like the wings of an avenging angel. Her perfectly styled hair had come loose from its elegant arrangement, and mascara tracked down her cheeks in dark rivulets that spoke of hours spent in desperate searching. The raw panic in her eyes transformed her from polished socialite into something primal and dangerous. a mother who believed her child was in mortal peril. Octavius immediately stopped walking and raised his hands in a gesture of peaceful surrender, but the damage was already done. The security team had closed the distance between them with military efficiency, forming a protective barrier around their employer while simultaneously cutting off any potential escape routes. Their movements spoke of extensive training and unlimited resources, the kind of protection that money could buy when ordinary safety measures weren't sufficient. The lead guard, a man whose scarred face suggested extensive combat experience, spoke rapidly into a wireless earpiece while never taking his eyes off Octavius. "Ma'am, please stay back while we assess the situation," the guard commanded with the authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. But Genevieve pushed past him with the fierce determination of maternal instinct, reaching for Cordelia with trembling hands. "Sweetheart, are you hurt? Did this man touch you? What did he want from you?" Her questions tumbled out in rapid succession, each one carrying implications that made Octavius's blood run cold. The crowd that had gathered around them began murmuring among themselves, their voices creating a low buzz of speculation and judgment. Cordelia looked confused and frightened by her mother's reaction, clinging to the stuffed reindeer while tears began forming in her eyes once again. "Mama, you're scaring me. They helped me find you when I was lost. Lyrical gave me her toy, and her daddy was very nice." Her small voice carried the innocent truth of the situation, but it seemed to fall on deaf ears as Genevieve's panic transformed into something darker and more accusatory. The fear in her eyes had crystallized into suspicion, fueled by cultural prejudices that ran deeper than conscious thought. "Call 911 immediately," Genevieve commanded her security team while pulling Cordelia protectively behind her. "I want this man arrested for attempted kidnapping. I want to know how long he had my daughter and what his intentions were." The accusations hit Octavius like physical blows, each word designed to destroy not just his reputation, but potentially his freedom and his ability to care for his own child. He felt Lyrical's small hand slip into his, seeking comfort and reassurance that he wasn't sure he could provide. The festival security officer who had been coordinating the search arrived breathless from running across the grounds, carrying her radio and a clipboard filled with incident reports. "Mrs. Whitmore, we've been in contact with these individuals for the past 20 minutes. They brought your daughter to our station and provided assistance in locating you." Her professional calm seemed to have little impact on the escalating situation, drowned out by the sound of approaching sirens that someone had already summoned. Red and blue lights began reflecting off the festival decorations, transforming the cheerful Christmas scene into something sinister and threatening. Octavius felt the familiar weight of systemic injustice settling over him like a suffocating blanket. Despite having done nothing wrong, despite having acted with compassion and responsibility, he found himself cast as the villain in a narrative shaped by fear and prejudice. The crowd's whispers grew louder, phones appeared to capture video footage, and he realized that regardless of the evening's outcome, this moment would follow him for years to come. His reputation in their small community, his job security, his ability to provide for Lyrical, everything hung in the balance of accusations that had no basis in reality. Lyrical pressed closer to his side, her 8-year-old mind struggling to understand why their act of kindness had provoked such a violent reaction. "Daddy, why is everyone so angry? We were just helping." Her questions pierced his heart because he had no answers that would make sense to someone who hadn't yet learned that the world often punished goodness based on the color of one's skin. As the police officers approached with their hands resting on their duty weapons, Octavius silently prayed that the truth would be sufficient to protect them both from a system that had historically failed people who looked like him. The police officers approached with practiced caution, their training evident in the way they positioned themselves to control the scene while gathering information. Officer Martinez, a veteran with graying temples and intelligent eyes, took charge immediately, requesting that everyone step back to allow proper investigation. His partner, a younger officer named Thompson, began interviewing witnesses while carefully documenting the chaotic scene with his body camera. The flashing emergency lights had drawn a substantial crowd, turning their private crisis into a public spectacle that would undoubtedly spread throughout social media within hours. "I want this man arrested immediately for kidnapping my daughter," Genevieve demanded, her voice carrying the imperious tone of someone accustomed to having her commands followed without question. She had wrapped Cordelia in her cashmere coat, creating a protective cocoon while shooting venomous glares at Octavius. He had her alone for who knows how long, and I want to know exactly what he was planning to do with her. Her accusations hung in the air like poison, each word carefully chosen to paint the darkest possible picture of their innocent encounter. Officer Martinez held up his hand for silence, his expression remaining professionally neutral despite the emotional intensity surrounding him. "Ma'am, I understand your concern, but I need to hear from all parties involved before making any determinations. These are serious allegations that require careful investigation." He turned to the festival security officer, whose radio had been crackling with updates from her colleagues stationed throughout the grounds. "Officer Chen, can you walk me through your interaction with these individuals?" Chen stepped forward with her clipboard, her detailed notes providing a timeline that contradicted Genevieve's narrative of predatory behavior. "Sir, Mr. Sterling and his daughter brought the missing child to our station approximately 25 minutes ago. They reported finding her crying near the carousel and immediately sought our assistance in locating her family. Mr. Sterling maintained appropriate distance while his daughter provided comfort to the victim." Her professional testimony carried weight that emotional accusations could not undermine, establishing a factual foundation that supported Octavius's version of events. But it was Cordelia herself who provided the most powerful defense, her small voice cutting through the adult confusion with crystalline clarity. "Mama, you're being mean to the nice people who helped me." She wriggled out of her mother's protective embrace, clutching the stuffed reindeer as she looked up at the towering police officers. "I was scared and crying because I couldn't find you. And Lyrical sat with me and told me stories about magical reindeer. Her daddy walked us to the security people to help find you." The child's testimony carried an authenticity that no adult manipulation could replicate, spoken with the unconscious honesty of someone too young to understand the racial dynamics poisoning the adult conversation. Officer Martinez knelt to her level, his voice gentle as he asked follow-up questions designed to clarify the sequence of events. Cordelia's responses painted a picture of kindness and appropriate behavior, describing how Octavius had maintained respectful distance while ensuring her safety throughout their journey to find help. Additional witnesses began coming forward, their accounts corroborating the Sterling family's version of events. A teenage employee from the hot chocolate stand confirmed seeing Cordelia wandering alone near the carousel, visibly distressed and calling for her mother. An elderly couple recalled observing Octavius and Lyrical walking carefully with the lost child toward the security station, their behavior consistent with good Samaritans rather than predators. Each testimony chipped away at Genevieve's accusations, revealing them to be products of panic and prejudice rather than factual observation. The festival's surveillance cameras provided the final nail in the coffin of false accusations. The security office's monitors showed clear footage of the entire sequence: Cordelia wandering away from the crowded vendor area, the Sterling family discovering her in distress, and their immediate decision to seek official help rather than handling the situation privately. The video evidence was incontrovertible, showing Octavius maintaining appropriate boundaries while prioritizing the child's safety and emotional well-being above all other considerations. As the truth emerged through multiple sources of verification, the atmosphere around them began to shift palpably. The crowd's hostile murmurs transformed into uncomfortable whispers of recognition. They had witnessed an innocent man being publicly accused of a heinous crime based solely on racial assumptions. Genevieve's security team stepped back, their professional assessment of the situation leading them to conclude that no actual threat had ever existed. Even Officer Thompson, who had initially approached with weapons-ready caution, now seemed embarrassed by the dramatic overreaction to what was clearly a case of good citizenship. Officer Martinez straightened slowly, his expression grave as he processed the complete picture that had emerged from witness testimony and video evidence. The weight of what had almost occurred, an innocent father potentially arrested in front of his daughter for the crime of showing compassion, settled over everyone present like a heavy shroud. Based on the evidence and witness statements, there is no indication of any criminal activity, he announced formally. Mr. Sterling, you and your daughter are free to go, and I want to thank you for your civic-minded assistance this evening. The ride home passed in suffocating silence, broken only by the Honda's struggling engine and Lyrical's occasional sniffles from the passenger seat. Octavius gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, his mind replaying the evening's events in an endless loop of humiliation and rage. The familiar streets of their neighborhood blurred past the windshield, but nothing felt familiar anymore. The world had revealed its true face tonight, stripping away any illusions he might have harbored about progress and acceptance in their community. Lyrical stared out the window with the hollow expression of someone whose innocence had been shattered in the span of a single evening. At 8 years old, she had witnessed her father being treated like a criminal for the simple act of helping another child, and no amount of parental protection could shield her from the implications of what she had seen. "Daddy, did we do something wrong?" she finally whispered, her voice barely audible above the car's labored breathing. The question pierced his heart because he had no answer that would make sense to someone who still believed the world was fundamentally fair. Their small apartment felt smaller than usual as they climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor, past Mrs. Rodriguez's door with its perpetual aroma of garlic and cumin. Octavius unlocked their door with hands that trembled slightly from residual adrenaline, ushering Lyrical inside before engaging all 3 deadbolts, a security routine that felt more necessary tonight than it had in months. The familiar space offered little comfort, its modest furnishings serving as stark reminders of everything they lacked in a world where wealth determined credibility. Lyrical settled onto the worn couch, still clutching her jacket despite the apartment's warmth, as if preparing for another sudden departure. "I don't understand why that lady was so mean to us when we were just trying to help her little girl," she said, her voice carrying the bewilderment of someone whose worldview had been fundamentally challenged. "Cordelia was crying and scared, and we made her feel better. Why did her mama act like we were bad people?" The conversation that followed was perhaps the most difficult of Octavius's parenting journey, requiring him to explain concepts that no child should need to understand. He sat beside his daughter and chose his words carefully, trying to convey the reality of racial prejudice without destroying her faith in human goodness. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people make judgments about others based on what they look like rather than who they really are inside," he began, his voice heavy with years of accumulated disappointments. "It's not fair, and it's not right, but it's something that people who look like us have to navigate every day." Meanwhile, across town in the sprawling Whitmore estate, a different conversation was taking place in surroundings that spoke of generational wealth and unquestioned privilege. Genevieve paced the marble floors of her daughter's bedroom, unable to settle despite the relief of having Cordelia safely home. The child had been bathed, fed, and tucked into bed with her collection of expensive dolls, but sleep seemed impossible as she continued to ask about her new friend Lyrical and when they might meet again. "Mama, why were you so angry at Lyrical's daddy?" Cordelia asked from beneath her silk comforter, her blue eyes wide with confusion that mirrored Lyrical's own bewilderment. "He was gentle and kind, and Lyrical shared her special reindeer with me when I was scared. They helped me find you, just like you always tell me to find a police officer or a nice family if I ever get lost." Her innocent questions struck at the heart of Genevieve's growing discomfort with her own behavior. Genevieve found herself unable to provide satisfactory answers to her daughter's queries, each question highlighting the gulf between her instinctive reactions and the actual evidence of what had occurred. The security footage had been unambiguous. Octavius had behaved with exemplary care and responsibility, maintaining appropriate boundaries while ensuring Cordelia's safety and emotional well-being. Yet her first instinct had been to assume the worst, to see predation where there had been protection, to interpret kindness as malevolence based solely on the color of his skin. The weight of her actions settled over her like a heavy blanket as she realized the magnitude of what she had almost done to an innocent family. An upstanding father could have been arrested, separated from his own child, and marked with accusations that would have followed him for the rest of his life. The thought of Octavius's daughter witnessing her father's humiliation made Genevieve's stomach turn with shame. She had nearly destroyed 2 lives in her moment of panic-driven prejudice. Sleep proved elusive for both families that night, though for vastly different reasons. While the Sterlings grappled with the painful reality of how quickly their good deed had transformed into a nightmare, the Whitmores confronted the uncomfortable truth about their own unconscious biases and the damage those assumptions could inflict on innocent people. The mahogany conference table in Genevieve's corner office reflected the morning sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, but she found herself unable to focus on the quarterly reports scattered before her. Board members had been speaking for 20 minutes about profit margins and market expansion, their voices fading into background noise as her mind replayed the previous evening's events with brutal clarity. She had built an empire on calculated decisions and logical analysis. Yet last night, she had abandoned all reason in favor of primitive fear and unconscious prejudice. Her assistant knocked softly before entering with the day's correspondence, but even routine business decisions felt impossible when her conscience demanded attention. "Mrs. Whitmore, your 10 o'clock appointment is here for the hospital wing dedication discussion," the young woman announced, but Genevieve waved her away with an uncharacteristic lack of interest in philanthropic planning. How could she discuss charitable giving when she had nearly destroyed an innocent family through her own moral blindness? The private investigator's report arrived by secure messenger before noon, containing details about Octavius Sterling that made Genevieve's shame deepen with each paragraph. He was a widower who had lost his wife to cancer 2 years earlier, working double shifts at Morrison's Auto Repair to support his daughter while maintaining an impeccable reputation in their community. Neighbors described him as reliable and kind, always willing to help elderly residents with car troubles or minor repairs without compensation. Teachers at Lyrical's school praised him as an involved parent who never missed conferences despite his demanding work schedule. The investigators' findings painted a picture of quiet dignity and personal sacrifice that stood in stark contrast to the criminal narrative she had constructed in her moment of panic. Octavius had no arrest record, no history of concerning behavior, no red flags that would justify even the slightest suspicion about his character or intentions. He was simply a good man trying to raise his daughter with limited resources and unlimited love, the kind of father she wished more children could have. Cordelia's persistent questions throughout the morning had been like daggers to her conscience, each innocent inquiry highlighting the disconnect between her actions and her values. "Mama, when can I see Lyrical again? She promised to show me how to braid friendship bracelets," the child had asked over breakfast, her excitement about her new friendship serving as a constant reminder of the connections that had been forged through genuine kindness. The irony was not lost on Genevieve. In attempting to protect her daughter from an imaginary threat, she had nearly deprived Cordelia of a meaningful friendship. The afternoon brought a consultation with her attorney, ostensibly about estate planning, but actually about understanding the potential legal ramifications of her accusations. The lawyer's expression grew increasingly grave as she described the previous evening's events, his professional demeanor unable to mask his shock at her behavior. "Genevieve, you realize that if this family chose to pursue defamation or civil rights violations, they would have an extremely strong case," he warned, his words carrying the weight of someone who understood the legal system's growing intolerance for racially motivated false accusations. But the legal implications paled in comparison to the moral weight of what she had done. As CEO of Whitmore Industries, she had built a reputation on corporate responsibility and ethical leadership, regularly speaking at conferences about social justice and equal opportunity. Her company's mission statement emphasized dignity and respect for all individuals, yet she had violated those principles in the most fundamental way possible when faced with a real-world test of her character. The evening news carried a brief segment about racial profiling incidents during the holiday season. featuring expert commentary about the psychological mechanisms that drive unconscious bias. As she watched academic researchers explain how fear and prejudice could override rational thinking in moments of perceived crisis, Genevieve recognized her own behavior with uncomfortable clarity. She had become a case study in everything she claimed to oppose, a cautionary tale about how quickly supposed enlightenment could crumble under pressure. By sunset, her decision had crystallized into absolute certainty. Tomorrow she would visit Morrison's Auto Repair, not to offer financial compensation, which would only compound the insult, but to provide the one thing that might begin to restore the dignity she had stripped away. She owed Octavius Sterling a sincere apology, delivered face-to-face without the protective barrier of wealth or status. It was the very least she could do to begin making amends for a wrong that could never be fully rectified. Morrison's Auto Repair occupied a weathered brick building on the industrial side of town, its hand-painted sign barely visible beneath decades of accumulated grime and urban pollution. The contrast between this humble establishment and Genevieve's usual environment of polished boardrooms and marble lobbies could not have been starker. She sat in her silver Mercedes for several minutes, watching through the chain-link fence as mechanics moved between vehicles with practiced efficiency. The familiar sounds of pneumatic tools and diesel engines created a symphony of honest labor that felt foreign to someone whose closest encounter with physical work involved signing paychecks. When she finally approached the service bay, several workers glanced up with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. Her designer suit and expensive handbag marked her as obviously out of place in this world of grease-stained coveralls and calloused hands. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, looked up from her appointment book with polite professionalism. "Ma'am, if you're here about your vehicle, our next opening isn't until Thursday afternoon," she explained, assuming this was another wealthy customer seeking priority treatment. "Actually, I'm here to speak with Octavius Sterling," Genevieve replied, her voice carrying less authority than usual. The request seemed to surprise the receptionist, who glanced toward the service bays with raised eyebrows before picking up an intercom microphone. "Octi, there's someone here to see you," she announced over the facility's speaker system. The casual abbreviation of his name suggested workplace relationships built on mutual respect rather than hierarchical formality, something increasingly rare in Genevieve's corporate environment. Octavius emerged from beneath a raised pickup truck, wiping his hands on a red shop rag while wearing an expression of polite confusion. When his eyes met hers, recognition dawned immediately, followed by something harder to interpret: wariness mixed with resigned professionalism. He approached slowly, maintaining the same careful distance he had exhibited at the festival, his body language suggesting someone prepared for another confrontation. "Mrs. Whitmore," he acknowledged formally, his tone neutral but cautious. "Mr. Sterling." "I was hoping we could speak privately," she began, conscious of the curious stares from his colleagues who had undoubtedly heard about the previous evening's incident. Small communities had efficient information networks, and she suspected that news of her accusations had already spread throughout their interconnected social circles. Octavius gestured toward a small office adjacent to the service bays, its glass walls offering privacy while maintaining visibility, a choice that spoke to his continued caution about being alone with her. The office was spartanly furnished with a metal desk, 2 plastic chairs, and automotive supply catalogs stacked on filing cabinets. Octavius remained standing until she sat, then chose the chair closest to the door, positioning that suggested he wanted easy escape routes if their conversation took another ugly turn. "What can I do for you?" he asked, his politeness carrying an undertone of exhaustion that made her realize how much emotional energy the previous evening had cost him. "I came to apologize," she said simply, abandoning the prepared speech she had rehearsed during the drive. "My behavior last night was inexcusable, and I want you to know that I understand the gravity of what I almost did to your family." Her words seemed to surprise him, his posture shifting slightly as he processed this unexpected development. "I allowed fear and prejudice to override my judgment, and I nearly destroyed an innocent man's reputation based on nothing more than unconscious bias." Octavius studied her face carefully. searching for signs of sincerity or manipulation in her expression. Years of navigating a world where his intentions were frequently questioned had taught him to read people with careful precision. "Mrs. Whitmore, I appreciate you coming here," he said finally, his voice still guarded but lacking the hostility she might have expected. "But words don't undo what happened. My daughter saw her father treated like a criminal for helping your child. That's not something an apology can fix." The conversation that followed was perhaps the most honest exchange Genevieve had experienced in years, stripped of corporate niceties and social pretense. Octavius spoke about the daily reality of raising a black child in a world that might assume the worst about them both, while she confronted the uncomfortable truth about her own unconscious assumptions. Neither offered easy forgiveness nor demanded immediate reconciliation, but something fragile and tentative began forming between them, the first thread of understanding that might eventually weave into something stronger. The invitation arrived by handwritten note rather than formal letterhead, its simple white stationery a deliberate choice that spoke to Genevieve's understanding of what this gesture required. "Cordelia has been asking about Lyrical every day," the note read in elegant script. "Would you and your daughter join us for dinner tomorrow evening? I'd like to give our children the chance to continue their friendship, and perhaps we adults can find some common ground as well." Octavius read the message twice before showing it to Lyrical, whose face lit up with the kind of pure joy that had become increasingly rare since their ordeal. The Whitmore estate's imposing iron gates and manicured gardens typically intimidated visitors, but Octavius felt surprisingly calm as they approached the front entrance in his carefully washed Honda. Lyrical pressed her face to the window, marveling at the fountain and topiary sculptures while clutching a small gift bag containing friendship bracelets she had spent hours crafting. "Daddy, do you think Cordelia will like the bracelets I made? I used her favorite colors from when she told us about her room," she asked, her excitement temporarily overriding any lingering anxiety about entering such an unfamiliar world. Genevieve answered the door herself, a gesture that did not go unnoticed by Octavius, who understood the significance of a wealthy woman greeting guests personally rather than delegating to household staff. She had traded her usual business attire for casual slacks and a simple sweater, her appearance suggesting someone attempting to minimize the vast economic differences between their families. "Please, come in," she said warmly, her smile genuine as she watched Cordelia barrel down the grand staircase with uncontainable enthusiasm. The reunion between the two girls was immediate and joyful, their friendship picking up exactly where it had been interrupted by adult complications. Cordelia squealed with delight at the handmade bracelets, immediately insisting that Lyrical help her put them on while chattering about all the things she wanted to show her new friend. Their easy companionship served as a bridge between the adults, creating natural conversation opportunities while demonstrating that children possessed an innate ability to form connections that transcended artificial social barriers. Genevieve had deliberately planned an informal evening, ordering pizza rather than preparing an elaborate meal that might emphasize their economic disparities. The gesture was not lost on Octavius, who appreciated her efforts to create comfortable common ground, despite the obvious wealth surrounding them. They gathered in the family kitchen rather than the formal dining room, sitting around a breakfast nook while the children shared stories and giggled over inside jokes that had already developed during their brief acquaintance. "Lyrical told me you work on cars," Genevieve said, her interest seeming genuine rather than politely obligatory. "That must be incredibly satisfying work, using your hands to solve problems and fix things that are broken." Octavius found himself talking about his profession with unexpected enthusiasm, describing the diagnostic challenges and mechanical puzzles that made each day engaging despite the physical demands. Her questions revealed surprising knowledge about automotive basics, learned during college summers spent working in her grandfather's small manufacturing business before family wealth had insulated her from such experiences. The evening's most magical moment came when Cordelia asked if they could decorate Christmas cookies together, producing an enormous kitchen island covered with sugar cookies, colored frosting, and an array of festive decorations. Watching Genevieve struggle with piping techniques while Lyrical patiently demonstrated proper sprinkle distribution created an atmosphere of shared learning that transcended their different backgrounds. The sight of a billionaire businesswoman taking instruction from an 8-year-old child on cookie artistry struck both adults as profoundly symbolic of the evening's larger themes. As they worked side by side, coating cookies with uneven layers of green and red frosting, their conversation gradually shifted from polite small talk to more substantive topics. Octavius spoke about his hopes for Lyrical's education and his dreams of eventually opening his own shop, while Genevieve shared her own childhood experiences of feeling isolated by wealth and the pressure of living up to family expectations. Their backgrounds could not have been more different, yet they discovered shared values about parenting, integrity, and the importance of teaching children empathy and resilience. The children's laughter provided a constant soundtrack to their adult conversation, two little girls who had found in each other the kind of friendship that exists beyond social categories or economic classifications. Watching them collaborate on an elaborate cookie castle, complete with frosting turrets and gumdrop decorations, both parents realized they were witnessing something precious, a relationship built purely on mutual affection and shared imagination, untainted by the prejudices and assumptions that complicated adult interactions. When the evening finally drew to a close, neither family seemed eager to end what had become an unexpectedly meaningful connection. Christmas morning dawned crisp and clear, painting the Sterling apartment in golden light that transformed their modest living space into something almost magical. Lyrical had awakened before sunrise, her excitement about the small pile of carefully wrapped gifts beneath their tabletop tree infectious enough to rouse even Octavius from his rare opportunity to sleep late. They were halfway through their traditional Christmas breakfast of pancakes and bacon when an unexpected knock interrupted their peaceful celebration. Through the window, Octavius could see an unfamiliar silver sedan parked outside, its expensive lines seeming out of place on their working-class street. Genevieve stood on their doorstep holding two elegantly wrapped packages, her breath visible in small puffs as she smiled nervously at their surprise. She had dressed casually in jeans and a warm coat, but her presence still carried an air of refined elegance that spoke to her privileged background. "I hope I'm not intruding on your family time," she said, her voice carrying genuine uncertainty about whether her visit would be welcome. "Cordelia insisted that we bring Lyrical's Christmas present in person, and I wanted to deliver something for you as well." The gifts she carried were not the ostentatious displays of wealth that Octavius had feared, but thoughtful selections that spoke to careful consideration of their recipients' actual interests and needs. Lyrical's package contained a beautiful set of art supplies, professional quality colored pencils, sketchbooks, and watercolor paints that would nurture her creative talents without overwhelming their small apartment. The accompanying card was written in Cordelia's careful cursive, expressing hope that they could create artwork together during future playdates and sleepovers. The envelope Genevieve handed to Octavius contained something far more valuable than expensive gadgets or luxury items. Inside was a scholarship application for Lyrical to attend Brookfield Academy, one of the region's most prestigious private schools, along with a letter confirming that all tuition and expenses would be covered through an anonymous endowment. "Every child deserves access to excellent education regardless of their family's financial circumstances," Genevieve explained quietly, her words carrying the weight of someone who understood that true generosity involved empowering others rather than creating dependence. But the second document in the envelope proved even more significant. A business proposal for Octavius to establish Sterling Automotive as an independent shop, complete with startup funding, equipment financing, and a guaranteed contract for maintaining the Whitmore Industries fleet. "This isn't charity," she emphasized, sensing his potential discomfort with accepting help. "This is an investment in someone whose integrity and skill have already been proven. I've done my research, and I know you'll build something meaningful with this opportunity." The transformation in their relationship had been gradual but profound, evolving from mutual suspicion through grudging respect to genuine friendship over the past several weeks. What had begun as a horrific misunderstanding rooted in prejudice had somehow blossomed into a connection that enriched both families in unexpected ways. Cordelia had become a regular fixture in the Sterling apartment, her natural curiosity and generous spirit complementing Lyrical's artistic temperament perfectly, while Genevieve had discovered that wealth meant little without the authentic relationships that money could not purchase. As they sat together around the Sterling small dining table, sharing coffee and Christmas cookies while the children played with their new art supplies, the artificial barriers that had once seemed insurmountable felt like distant memories. Their conversations flowed naturally between topics ranging from parenting challenges to business strategies, each finding wisdom and perspective in the other's vastly different life experiences. The mutual respect that had grown between them transcended economic status or racial differences, founded instead on shared values of integrity, compassion, and dedication to their children's well-being. Octavius looked around the room at this unlikely gathering, his daughter creating masterpieces with expensive art supplies while chattering with her best friend, a billionaire businesswoman laughing at his stories about difficult customers and automotive mysteries, and marveled at how profoundly their lives had changed. What should have been their darkest hour had somehow transformed into their greatest blessing, proving that even the most painful misunderstandings could become catalysts for unexpected growth and connection. The afternoon sun streaming through their windows illuminated more than just their modest apartment. It revealed the miraculous truth that Christmas had indeed worked its ancient magic, transforming fear into understanding, prejudice into friendship, and two separate families into something resembling a chosen community bound together by love, forgiveness, and the shared commitment to building a better world for their children.